Hi pet lovers, thank you for joining Gina's Grooming Channel. Today we're going to be talking about grooming arms and grooming loops. Now we addressed this subject a few years ago on a video, but we want to bring you a new and improved version, and we also want to talk about some of the new innovations that have occurred in the industry. Now I have equipped my table with 3 different types of basic grooming arms, and we're then going to jump in to how they work in conjunction with grooming loops. So grooming arms are something that you attach to your table, right, with a clamp, and I'm going to show you on this very basic model. There's a clamp that we adjust from the bottom, tighten this up, and now we can adjust with this tightening and loosening nut, right, the height of this grooming arm. Now this applies for the other styles that you see here as well. They go up and down depending on the height that you need for the pet that you're grooming. And I just want to mention that sometimes you also have foldable arms. So here's a foldable grooming arm that you can take with you or store very easily if you're doing home grooming. Okay, so let me clear this table of all of these different types of grooming arms now that you see the different styles, and I'll put in the description below exactly what you can be using these for in particular, but really they all do the same thing. Again, is to be working in conjunction with a grooming loop to ensure the safety of a pet. All right, now we simplified our playing field a little bit here. I left this grooming loop. This is the one that I use mostly for my clients. Now the over-the-table one that you saw that I just removed, I want you to know that that's really good if you have multiple dogs that you're working with, or I'm going to show you need to have like a belly loop, and we'll talk about that. But for most of our dogs, we have a basic grooming arm, right? This one, again, is foldable. I can adjust it in different places. I have an adjustment nut here and an adjustment nut here. Okay, and this folds over very nice. And I also want to talk about placement on your table. So this one right now is on the corner, but if I loosen that clamp, a lot of groomers like to keep the grooming arm, let's say at the face of the table, but really it's your preference. So whether or not you put it in the middle at the face of your table, this is where the dog is going to be facing, or to the side, really doesn't matter. It's a really personal preference, but most of my dogs, I'll go ahead and put it smack dab right in the middle, facing the head of the table. So grooming arm is nothing really without a grooming loop. And now this is where it gets a little more interesting, because we are going to be using something called a grooming loop and working in conjunction with the grooming arm, right? Hooking this in. And now we've created a little grooming station that dogs are trained to know that when they're on a table and in a grooming loop safely, they know it's grooming time. So the basic usage of this loop, right, so you see that it hooks in, is there's going to be a tightening, an adjustment lever or a nut or some kind of a mechanism that will allow you to tighten, okay, the static grooming loop. And I want to focus on that word static. So when I say static, it's because this does not get tighter if there's any pressure, and that's very important. I'm going to show you in a slip lead what I mean in a few seconds, but just understand that the grooming loops that we are talking about are static and they will not tighten when pressure is applied to them. And now this loop and arm, I'm going to adjust to the height of my pet. So let's go and get our fake pet. I'm going to introduce you to Pierre. He helped us out in our first video as well. So he's been waiting a little while to make his appearance back to you. So I will be back in a second with Pierre. All right, guys. Well, I brought Pierre to help us, if you guys remember. Hi, Pierre. How you doing?
Well, here I am. What were your other 2 wishes?
Guys, the reason why I'm not using a live animal is not only am I going to show you how to use your grooming arm and grooming loop safely and correctly, I'm also going to show you how not to use it. So some dangerous things that I have seen out in the field, and for that purpose, I'm going to be using Pierre and not a live animal. Okay, so the basic usage for grooming arms, grooming loops, right, is that we have that adjusting nut, right? We want to make sure that we adjust it down to the height of our pet so that it can go around their throats gently and delicately. So let's do that. This is basic usage where we're going to make sure that our pup gets into the grooming arm and grooming loop, and then we're going to use that tightening ring, that tightening mechanism to tighten down, make sure that it's secure, but obviously not choking the pet. So very important also with our basic usage here is how high should this be? A lot of people think, oh, looser is better. And that's not really true, because if you have a loose grooming loop and a very low grooming arm, this dog can potentially get off of the table. So the answer to how high and how tight we need to keep this is for safety. We want to make sure that it's taut enough so that a pet cannot step off the table. This is very important. This is as far as Pierre can go in any direction. So making sure that it's tight enough, right, so that they can't jump off the table or step off the table, but loose enough that it's comfortable. Now, for review, if Pierre was a special needs baby or a puppy or a dog that startles very easily, we're going to take this down a little lower because I'm going to show you how we're going to harness under his little arm and get that under his leg pit or armpit. For that, we need to loosen that tightening ring, okay, and then tuck the grooming loop under one paw. Now, what this does is it eliminates any pressure on the throat and puts it on the chest, especially if you have special needs dogs with bad tracheas. This is very important. Again, or if you have skittish dogs, you want to make sure to remove anything from being around a dog's throat and put it toward the chest. All right, guys, so now we know how to use it on a basic level. Let's talk about how not to use it. Obviously, we already covered that this should not be too tight, not too loose either, because that's also a safety concern, but just right so the pet cannot walk off the table. But I want to show you guys something that a lot of groomers I have seen do in the past, which is a big no-no. So I want to talk about using a slip lead on an elevated surface like your grooming table. Okay, guys, this is a slip lead or a kennel lead. It can be used in many different ways, especially if you have a veterinary hospital or a kennel, but basically you have a ring and this loop tightens and loosens, okay? And what I've seen a lot of groomers do, and this is something that we should never be doing, is to use a slip knot, and this is why Pierre is very important to show, and they will secure, let's say this grooming arm's a little up, they will secure a pet with their slip lead. Okay, now this holds the pet, right, serves the purpose of that grooming loop, but it introduces a very big safety concern. When you have a slip lead on an elevated surface, it's not big a leap of logic to think that if the dog does jump off the table in any way, this will get tighter around the neck. So you have to be incredibly careful to never use any kind of a slip knot on an elevated surface. If you're working on a dog on the floor and you've got a hitch that you're hitching a dog to, then you can consider using a slip knot or a slip lead. But when you're on an elevated surface, make sure that you use a static, non-tightening grooming loop. Okay, so I want you guys to promise to never ever use a tightening slip lead on an elevated surface. I hope that I made those safety concerns really clear. Guys, I know sometimes it's the fastest and easiest way to do things, but we gotta keep everything safe. So always remember, no slip lead on elevated surface, always a static grooming loop. All right, guys, now I want to share with you guys some innovations that I have been using as part of my regular routine in my salon, and want to show you some new technology as it relates to grooming arms and grooming loops. The first of them is going to be, this is from Jelly Pet, which has now become my favorite company for grooming arms and grooming loops, is an extender. And let me show you how cool this is. So what this is, an extender that you can extend, right, so you don't have to constantly be moving your grooming arm up and down. You can leave it pretty much static all day, leave it like this, and depending on the dogs that you're working with in the day, you can select the proper ring height for that pet, okay? And if you need to move it down, right, give a little more flexibility, right? If the dog, you're doing a technique or you have a smaller dog, okay, you can go ahead and click it up. So really time saving, especially your hands are sometimes soapy or wet or in product and things like that. So really helps to get this loop extender. Wanted you guys to be aware that this exists. In addition to the loop extender, there's also kits. This is also from Jelly Pet, and we did a video about the safety tether, but just want to show you that there are things and different ways that we can use our grooming arm and grooming loop to really create a safer environment for our pets and a better working environment for us groomers. Now, even if you're working with your pet at home, you may have some problems that professional groomers encounter, such as a dog spinning around, not wanting to stay in one place. Or you may have a dog that is biting back. You're trying to do nails, and this dog is biting back. What Jelly Pet has is they have a grooming loop and they've attached a ring to it. And what this can do is attach to the safety tether. Okay, and now this prevents the dog from doing those spins, from snapping back. So this is great to use when you have certain grooming procedures that need the dog to stay still for that time. Obviously, don't overuse constraints. Always it's better to have the dog be comfortable and move around as they want to safely on the table, always remembering they can't put that foot off of that table. Right? But if you are doing a technique and this is going to help you, definitely know that it's available. And just to make sure that if your dog is spinning or snapping, there are tools that can help you. And last but not least, in the grooming loop arena, this has been my favorite product of 2023, which is a belly loop. So if you have dogs that cannot stand, dogs that have issues with arthritis, or if you have dogs that are just older and they need a little more support, we do have this belly loop, and you can use that in conjunction with your regular loop. Now this is going to allow the dog to be supported in the belly area. And I have dogs that sometimes just kind of stumble, and having this belly loop gives them that perfect amount of security that gives them a little more stability so that they can get through the grooming procedure a little more comfortably and less stressed out. So guys, yes, if you are working with big dogs or dogs that have arthritis or some problems standing, definitely consider looking into a belly loop to add to your entire grooming arm and grooming loop configuration. Well, all right, guys, I hope that gives you a good understanding of how grooming arms and grooming loops work together to help you get grooming procedures done. And guys, this is for safety and for the comfort of the pets. So I know that it looks like maybe a noose or something hanging. It is completely not. This is definitely something that pets understand, especially if they're trained to be groomed, that this is their grooming time. So it really helps the groomer. It really helps the pets. And as long as that we're safe and making sure we take all health considerations into play when selecting how we're going to use our grooming loop, it really is a wonderful tool. Guys, thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for any questions, comments. Please put them down below. We are happy to answer. Guys, we really appreciate your time. Thanks for that thumbs up. We will see you soon. Bye.